right, we have a slightly shorter program this week, and I'll admit it, it's because I'm lazy. I didn't feel like doing any more interviews. Well, anyway, this week I have an excellent conversation with somebody whom you have not heard from for a while, at least on this program. That's right, Skip Murphy. And I spent some time speaking with Dr. Matt Briggs about Trump's polling numbers and some comparisons to an election in 1980 that you might have heard of. All that and maybe a little bit more, but first, this.
I would be a lot less afraid of it if I just knew what it was called.
Let's call it Steve.
Steve?
It's a pretty name.
Steve sounds nice.
Yeah, I'm a lot less scared of Steve.
Oh, great and powerful Steve! What do you want?
I don't think you can speak.
Crow, Maggie Hassan for Senate Forces are running a political ad that I had to put in the proper context for my kids. The ad focuses on U.S. Senator Kelly Ayotte voting 6 times to defund Planned Parenthood. Ooh. Well, what does that really mean? The ad could just as easily have said she voted 6 times to defund Microsoft, Starbucks, Walmart, or even Apple. That is to say that were anyone to vote to not give or to stop giving tax dollars to any of them, they'd all still be there doing what they do, just like they always did. The Hassan ad means nothing because Planned Parenthood is a multi-billion-dollar international business, like Microsoft or Walmart or Apple. If a Republican voted to defund Walmart, they'd be hailed for defending taxpayers from crony capitalism, probably by the same people paying to peddle the defunded Planned Parenthood lies. But when the billion-dollar international corporation kills millions of black lives annually, well, that's another matter. Democrats will defend that operation till the end of days. But not because Planned Parenthood is a charity or a public utility. They're a private concern with one job: prevent human life. All the other services they are credited with, by the way, are offshored to third parties. Places you can go to get these services without ever having heard of a Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood has one job: prevent human birth. Planned Parenthood is nothing more than a hired gun of the Democrat establishment, collecting a politically protected, taxpayer-backed stipend to keep human beings from seeing the light of day. Planned Parenthood does not rely on, nor do they need a dime from taxpayers. In fact, Planned Parenthood spent more money on lobbying in New England than they get in taxpayer fund money from idiot politicians in New Hampshire. That means that regardless of what they tell you, we're not providing health care to women, even if you actually believe that is what Planned Parenthood does. We are backstopping the expense accounts of lobbyists and activists who then give money back to politicians to keep the train of free money moving. No one is defunding anything. They are leaving monies in place that could be spent on roads, bridges, education, law enforcement, or, God forbid, tax relief. So what the ad is telling you is that, believe it or not, Kelly Ayotte, on at least 6 occasions, objected to corporate welfare. Democrats like Maggie Hassan support corporate welfare the way they support racism, sexism, and bigotry. As long as the attacks are on their ideological enemies, fire at will.
This is a test. This is only 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 a test.
All right, well, Skip, welcome back.
Well, thank you very much.
You had a great subject you wanted to talk about, and it's one we haven't touched on recently. Glenn Reynolds.
Glenn Reynolds of Instapundit fame, somebody I quote quite a bit. He's obviously the leading conservative libertarian news aggregator site in the right side of the blogosphere. And he got himself into some trouble. Actually, I don't think it's a problem at all, but the social justice warriors on the left have decided they're out for another scalp.
Well, I read without knowing what he'd written, I read the question, what do you do when you're on the highway and all these violent protesters have blocked your way and there's riots nearby and you're fearful for the safety of your family? And the three words that came to mind were the three words he used.
Yes, he had decided that he was going to quote a report from a local TV newsroom that was showing all of the rampaging going on in Charlotte, where these protesters, and I think a lot of media areas misnamed them. Instead of protesters, they should have been called rioters. They tried to pull a photographer, news guy into an open flame, open bonfire, defaced public and private property, assaulted other people. They were going. They had stopped a highway and were milling around. Not milling. They were going around to different cars, and a lot of people were. When I saw the pictures, all I could think of was 1992 in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah.
People going crazy. And Reginald Denny was a name that came up through some of the posts that I was reading. He was the trucker whose truck was stopped, yanked him out of there, and beat him nearly to death. I remember seeing the video of somebody picking up a concrete block and breaking it over his head. So his Glenn Reynolds tweet went out, 3 words, run them down, with a picture of these rioters going after the cars. And I'll tell you something, and I've told the most esteemed wife this before, that if I was ever caught in a situation like that, it's pedal to the metal. If you're going to attack me and threaten my life with my wife and my relatives, I'm sorry. I'm not going to sit there like some lily-livered, spineless liberal and let them do their worst to me.
All right, so yeah, I agree, and he wrote that, and since then, they have decided that this has made him a target of opportunity.
Oh, yes. Yes, and I have already seen this play out once before, personally here at Granite Rock. But basically, what has happened is all these social justice warriors who are all in with Black Lives Matter and the social injustices that are going on, basically took him to say he's inciting violence. So, you look at the tweet, you look at the caption from WBTV, and you go, of course you know what he's talking about. This is simple common sense. First off, you don't want to go in near a riot, but if you're stuck in one, like these rioters caused, you get yourself out of there. Well, it looks like Twitter immediately suspended him. He didn't even know what had happened. He just went to go tweet, and he came up with the message, your account at Instapundit is currently suspended. For more information, please visit blah, 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 suspended accounts. So they didn't even bother to ask. Now, we on the right know that Twitter and Facebook and a few other places have gone all social justice warrior on us, and their point is not to make amends or to discuss, but to silence. There cannot be any dissent. And they shut down his account, and he finally found out that it was his tweet, run them down. Then after that, the social justice army decided, let's go after him at USA Today. So they complained there. They suspended his twice-weekly column there, which I read quite often. It's very good. And from what I understand, he's one of the most widely read columns at USA Today. Well, they're not content with that. They're going after his job at the University of Tennessee Law School, where Professor Reynolds has been a very well-liked person. So here's part of what the dean said. So the dean wrote this, and I'm going to quote from it. The university is committed to academic freedom, freedom of speech, and diverse viewpoints, all of which are important for an institution of higher education and the free idea of exchange of ideas. My colleagues and I in the university leadership support peaceful civil disobedience and all forms of free speech, but we do not support violence or language that encourages violence. Professor Reynolds has built a significant platform to discuss his viewpoints, but his remarks on Twitter are an irresponsible use of his platform. Now, you and I both know, and probably most of our listeners and readers know, that terrorists can use Twitter and it's not shutting down. People want to kill us because we're conservatives or that we're Christians or we basically just don't toe the progressive line. They'll do anything they want and Twitter doesn't do much to them. They even formed a committee that was supposed to patrol Twitter and take down violent and unnecessary tweets. Well, frankly, when it comes down to looking at the analysis, more conservatives get shut down because all these people on these committees are social justice warriors from the left. And of course, anything we say is hate speech and irresponsible and cannot be put up with.
Tom Bloomer at MRC noted that as a result, Twitter, of course, took down Professor Reynolds' post, but they regularly ignore hashtags like kill whites or kill all white people. And we could go on for hours giving examples of the direct violence and threats against people on the right that Twitter has absolutely no interest in taking down.
No, it comes down to a four-letter word: bias.
Yep.
And it's bias in one direction. And we see that with Facebook as well, to the point where a lot of conservatives are looking for alternatives. Because unfortunately, while Granite Rock was built on the idea of the discussion of ideas, both left and right, I hardly ever ban anybody. And in fact, we have a few hardcore lefties who comment all the time. All I ask is that they stay clear of rule number one, and they can say what they want, and they do. If we can't win in the arena of ideas, we deserve to lose. Unfortunately, in other places, that doesn't hold true. And, Twitter started off about 3 years ago. It had a cap of about $40 billion. It's now down to 13. Their growth in new users is 1% or less, and now they're starting to shop themselves around to be sold, which tells you where it's going. And,
last week on that, I joined the new Twitter alternative called Gab, which is a combination of Twitter with more characters. It has the little up and down vote arrows like you see at sites like Reddit, and it has a couple other features. And, of course, it's only been out for about 16 days live, and you can go to gab.ai and request access, and they'll let you in if you're a nice person. And maybe they'll let you in if you're a naughty person. I guess it doesn't really matter. But it is an open platform. They only have a few rules. The few rules are no pornography and a few other things like that, and just to respect each other. And there's not a lot of people there yet, but it's just got it started. And I figured I'd give it a try, and they let me in. So every now and again I throw something up and see what happens, and we'll see how it goes. But it's nice to see that there's an alternative. It's not as annoying as Reddit. Hopefully it stays that way, but it is another choice. And once again, gab.ai if you're interested.
I'll have to try. Now, to all of our listeners, both Steve and I understand and believe that this is not a First Amendment issue. First Amendment is to restrict government from restricting us. These private companies, Twitter, Facebook, and the others, can run their sites any way that they want, just like we run Granite Rock the way that we want to. So there's nothing that can be done there. But when they put themselves up as being open and inclusive, don't you just love the way that they define inclusive? If they put themselves out there as that and then act other, well, then they deserve all the derision that we can muster.
That's absolutely correct. It's like the media. The media pretends that it's not biased, but it obviously is. And this is another circumstance where, they say they have this open platform for discussion, but it is obviously not. And yeah, sure, it's a private company. They can do whatever they want, and they can even come out and say, "Look, we don't care what you think about our bias," and that's fine too. But then they'd be being honest about it, and I don't think they're going to do that.
No, and I think that we're seeing that now. Obviously, tonight's the first presidential debate, and we're seeing all of the media lining up against Donald Trump. Now, you can say one thing or the other as to why, but it is clear that what used to be called objective media has become, over the years, less and less tolerant of those of us on the right, and now they've really taken off the gloves. And as I keep saying, all you got to do is look for proof, is look at their subscription rates and look at their stock prices. And you're seeing, when you insult half the nation, why do we have to do anything? Look at what Target did with their trying to be social justice type people with allowing transgender people into whatever bathroom that they want. We've run the stories about, hey, it isn't about that. It's about the people who want to take advantage of that. Well, their revenues are down, their stock price is down, and they still refuse to say, hey, maybe we did this to ourselves, except for the fact they decided, well, we'll put in one bathroom, sort of like single entry, one person at a time, and that should take care of the problem. This is like the anti-gunner saying, take the guns away and all the violence will go away. No, it won't. It'll be just like Britain, where there's other kinds of violence to take its place. This is craziness.
You have to wonder if think about it. Their whole government experiment, their whole central planning experiment is just a macrocosm of these little microcosms of, you have these cities that are in massive debt and are completely burdened by these contracts, and then you have these businesses and the media that run themselves like the left, and they behave like the left, and they can't make a profit, or they're losing money, or they're losing ad revenue, and things are going down the toilet. And then they take the country, and they do the same thing, and it follows the same path, and everybody's like, no, it's going to work.
Yeah, well, they just can't seem to take their eyes and put it on the example right now that is the best of all, which is Venezuela. Socialist for years, and look what's happened. They can't look at, they're always saying, well, the right people haven't implemented it yet. Oh, but socialism will still be far better. Well, just look at East Germany and the results of utter socialism, and West Germany, capitalism. So you're right. And the problem is for us on the right, if they want to live in a socialist regime, good. Go pick a couple of states. California's really good. New York's really good. Illinois is just about there. Pick a couple of socialist states. Go live there. Self-select, please. Leave the rest of us alone.
Oh, they can't do that.
No, they cannot do that. Everybody has to be in because of that Democrat phrase, the government is the one thing we all belong to. They really like that word belong.
Well, somebody's got to pay for it.
Unfortunately, they seem to think of it in a different definition than us.
Yeah, and somebody's got to pay for it.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to pay for it, and there's never going to be enough of them, and they don't want to pay for it.
No, they don't. And, even now with Obama's regionalization, they have felt for years that the reason why the urban schools, for instance, are doing so poorly, or the inner city governments are doing so poorly, is the whites took their money and ran. And we saw the FFH rule from HUD say, hey, Dubuque, you're going to pay for Section 8 of Chicago.
I mean, if you've listened, I was talking to Ann Corcoran and John Zimmerak last week, and that podcast is up, and we were talking about refugee resettlement and the kind of things that they're looking for to settle refugees. They're looking for welfare areas, welfare-friendly areas, places with mosques, places with lots of college students that are friendly to the whole liberal idea of resettlement. And the two cities where we had terrorism last week are two places where the government's been dumping refugees for a long time, and eventually you're going to get this because we know that they're going to keep bringing them in, and we know that you're going to keep having Syrians and Iraqis and people who are inclined. Mathematically, it's impossible to not eventually have some of them radicalized, no matter how peaceful you may or may not think they are, and people are going to go on a rampage, and Americans are going to die.
Yeah, and there was this brouhaha last week about Trump Jr.'s little bowl full of Skittles, and he said 3 of them are poison. Now, how many do you want to eat? And I'm sorry, but that's the numbers game. And we have, the social justice warriors, and I hate to keep saying that and going to that, but they're the ones that are driving a lot of it. And I think that they're responsible. They're irresponsible. But you look over in Europe at what's going on, and it's a very, very small number. But how many people have they killed? How many people have died now under the Obama administration here in the U.S. for the few people who have radicalized and have gone on the warpath? Sorry, that's not politically correct either now, is it?
Well, here's another thing that isn't. Mark Stein said last week or within the last few weeks, he said, well, if you take a look at the countries that have lots of Muslim refugees and lots of Muslim immigration, they have lots of terrorism. If you look at the countries that have almost none, they don't have any.
Right. I look back at one of my ancestral homes, Sweden, and they've got about 55 to 60 no-go areas. They're undergoing a rash of fires and car burnings and sexual assaults. You look at Germany, that has brought in the most people, and every single other day, there's a new story about some miscreant, misogynist immigrant from the Middle East assaulting young girls, young boys, women. I mean, it's to the point where they have to guard their pools. They don't know how to handle their musical festivals. The immigrants are roaming the towns, from mid-evening to late at night and scaring all of the regular folks. I'm sorry, but you can have invasion by other than military means.
Absolutely, and I certainly seem to be having one. And it's all connected. People need to understand that the same people, as you pointed out, not just the social justice warriors, but their evil leaders, are all behind it, and they have a plan. They really do. And you don't have to believe it, but if you take a look at the America you live in and what it was like 10 or 15 or 20 years ago and what it's like now, things have changed.
They have. Most fundamentally, I think, is the morality that has changed. Now, that's not to say that I think that the United States was ever perfect, but there was this shared viewpoint of what was right and what was wrong. And early in Obama's administration, I used to write all the time, I can't keep up with all of the changes that are going on. And now we're seeing them coming even faster and more. We're seeing the rule of law being assaulted and ignored by the Obama administration. We see it happening in Democrat areas. We see that which used to be held in high esteem, like duty, honor, truthfulness, all positive attributes. Go to church, pay your taxes, work hard, be nice, and it's not working anymore. In fact, we who still hold to those things are derided as being old-fashioned or to be taken advantage of.
And we're kicked off Twitter.
And we get kicked off Twitter. Well, I'll tell you, there were times when I was tweeting during the debates earlier, and I using I can't even remember what it was that Twitter took away. But I would try to watch my tweets come through, and I was noticing not all of the tweets as Granite Rock were being replicated where I thought that they should go. So I think
TweetDeck?
TweetDeck, yeah. So when they took that away, I decided not to tweet anymore.
So you're not going to tweet the debate tonight?
I probably am not.
Okay, well, we're just about out of time. I'm going to let you loose so you can go watch that thing. Any closing remarks?
Yeah, I think more and more people on the right, or just people who want to be left alone, it's nice to say you want to be left alone, but I think nowadays you have to fight for that right. And we're seeing that the culture has turned against that, and unless you stand up and fight for it, it will disappear. You, as Eric Erickson said, you will be made to care. That means the converse is true. Even if you don't want to, you will be forced to. And we see with all the nuttiness going on in campuses, the idiocy going on with the federal agencies, and even here in New Hampshire, rulemaking by non-legislators, judicial decisions by non-judiciary. I think we're losing a big deal. So it's time to get off the couch and start doing stuff, or at least have a keyboard on the couch while you're doing it.
All right, Skip. Thanks a lot. You have a great night. Enjoy the debate.
I will. Take care, sir, and thanks for having me on.
All righty. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Someone is killed by a car in New Hampshire every 3 days. Governor Maggie Hassan signed the hands-free bill that turned otherwise law-abiding New Hampshire citizens into criminals. By making it illegal to be seen touching their cell phones while driving, more motorists are taking their eyes off the road, resulting in a 20% increase in the number of people killed by motor vehicles, all thanks to Governor Hassan. But Hassan's body count doesn't stop there. Her refusal as governor to stand up and oppose amnesty and illegal immigration favored by her Democrat Party masters encouraged more trafficking of drugs across our southern border. Drugs killed 6 people in the Granite State every 5 days in 2015, a number projected to rise to 4 killed every 3 days in 2016. The way Maggie Hassan's body count keeps rising, you'd think she was a Clinton. Voting for Maggie Hassan is suicide, and not just because she supports Chicago-style gun control. Some stories you just can't ignore, like this one from the UK Daily Mail. A recent spike in clown sightings across the country has prompted fears that a menacing trend is on the rise. Terrified residents have reported being terrorized by people dressed up in the costumes in more than 10 states since August. Among them was one woman who claimed to have been assaulted, and worrying accounts of children being lured towards woods by the disguised figures. In South Carolina, police have issued a stark warning to whoever is frightening the community. It's illegal, it's dangerous, it's inappropriate, and it's creating community concern, so it needs to stop, Greenville Police Chief Ken Miller said last month. His message came after 4 separate reports of clowns near play parks and apartment complexes. Parents said the clowns were holding green lasers, while children said they appeared to have large sums of cash, Fox Carolina reports. One vigilante is said to have chased the clown away with a machete. Officers have, however, encouraged people to take photographs if they encounter the clowns again, having been unable to find them since reports were made. We have increased patrols in the area where sightings have occurred, and will be stepping up crime prevention in these apartment complexes and neighborhoods. We encourage the community to document and report suspicious activity to police.
Our next guest is a writer, philosopher, statistician, adjunct professor, and many other things. Please welcome back to the program Dr. Matt Briggs. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
Great. Thank you very much. So this is an interesting conversation because last week I did an interview with a gentleman, and we were comparing the political establishment's public opposition to Mr. Trump in 2016 to the then Republican establishment's public objections to Barry Goldwater back in 1964. And lo and behold, this week you've written something about Mr. Trump's reported polling numbers compared to those of Mr. Reagan, who of course supported Mr. Goldwater in his iconic speech, A Time to Choose. So it's quite clear that Mr. Trump is neither a Goldwater nor a Reagan, but you have uncovered some meaningful similarities, not just in how the media is treating them, but in how the polling has turned out. Can you explain that?
That's exactly, your point is exactly right. Trump is not Reagan, he's not Goldwater, he's not a ideological conservative. So there's no analogs as far as that goes. But the analogs I was talking about in the 1980 election, which had Carter against Reagan, were in the fact that the press at the time treated Reagan as a pariah. He was a dangerous cowboy with his finger on the nuclear button. He was an idiot. He was a fool. He was somebody you couldn't trust. He was a racist. He was all these terrible things. They painted him in the most desperate, dire terms. And they made everybody shy about admitting that they would like Reagan. It was so bad that after the Republican convention, John Anderson, who was one of the Republican candidates who lost to Reagan in the primaries, became a never Reagan person and launched an independent bid for the presidency. So he was also in this race, and not unlike this year where we have Gary Johnson running as a libertarian, not quite as a never Trump, but as an alternative to Hillary or Trump. So the thing was that leading up to the election, about a month before the election, the polls had Reagan about 4 points down from Trump. I'm sorry. I'm getting so confused about all these things. Reagan was down about 4 points down from Carter. And there was about a 7-8% chance for 7-8% support for Anderson. Well, those polls did tighten by the end of the race, and the polls right before the election, immediately before the election, they had Reagan ahead, about 47 to 44, winning the election. But the eventual tallies had Reagan at 51%, much higher. This is an 8-point swing. So there was some of these people, many people, who were just not embarrassed to admit that they liked Reagan, but they were cowed. They were, pressured into not saying anything. And there was a lot of support, a lot of hidden support for Reagan that was out there. And you could tell that by the large number of undecideds or people who just weren't saying anything. And we're seeing exactly the same sort of phenomena with Trump. There's a lot of people. There's these never-Trumpers who are in the Republican establishment side. There's, of course, all the social justice warriors of the left who paint Trump in the most vicious terms that you can imagine. To say, that you're for Trump publicly, requires a lot of guts in some quarters. Not everywhere, of course, but in some quarters. I mean, if you're working at a company in New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles, if you're in Hollywood, this kind of thing, people who are Trump supporters are going to tend to keep their mouths shut about this. So I think in the end, right now the polls are very close, depending on which one you look at, of course. I mean, Trump and Clinton are almost in a tie. Clinton maybe on the average is slightly ahead, two points or so. But this is the same kind of thing we saw leading up to the 1980 election. I think we're going to see the same sort of thing in this election.
I agree. I have made this case frequently on the air and in writing. And I would say that there's obviously a lot of differences here. I mean, you have a sitting president versus, no incumbent. There's a lot of other factors that are involved. But when you talk about the environment, Reagan was the first president I ever voted for. So I'm familiar with, that was the beginning of my political career, sort of, anyway. But, now things are much more hostile. The public pillorying that you take thanks to social media is enormous. So I would see that there is a lot more pressure for people who are shy about Trump. And I think that his base is very dedicated. They're obviously not afraid of anybody. But a lot of these people didn't vote before. And a lot of them registered to vote for Trump. And we saw that in New Hampshire. We had record primary turnout in the first in the nation primary, and we just had a statewide election where we had record lack of turnout. So I'm pretty sure that there's an awful lot of people out there that were in electoral hibernation who've come out, and become these born-again registered voters. And I'm not even sure if the pollsters are talking to those people. Do you think that's possible?
Well, polling has changed quite a lot, because of technology. A lot of people don't have landlines anymore, the younger people especially. They got to try to catch them on cell phones. A lot of cell phone calls are screened. It's very difficult to get a good sample of people. But, the support that you do find, a lot of people are anti-Trump. The Hillary people are anti-Trump. Of course they are. But a lot of the establishment people are also anti-Trump. But what you don't see is a lot of people who are pro-Hillary in the sense that they can't wait for Hillary to be in office herself because they envision her as some great leader. So right after the debate, for instance, a lot of the establishment people and the people on the Republican side were wishing that Trump did better. I think he did just fine. Right after he had a rally in Florida, he had to turn thousands away, thousands of people who were rallying to his side. And today, a poll came out. You have to look at these polls that came out after the debate. There was this Gravis poll. It was a D+4, they call it, meaning they oversampled Democrats. This is the key point right here. They oversampled Democrats by about 4% because, in their opinion, they think in the eventual election, Democrats are going to outweigh Republicans by about 4%. And in that poll, after the debate, Trump was ahead of Hillary by 4 points. So this is a huge thing because, as you said, I'm bringing it back to your point, which is excellent. I don't think that they're right about this D+4 thing. We're not seeing this overwhelming support for Hillary. People are not coming out in droves for her. Her supporters are there, it's true, but the people who are for Trump are many, many more. A lot of new registrations, a lot of Democrats switching parties and so forth. I think his true support is not only because that we have a lot of people being shy about admitting liking Trump, but the polling methods themselves are relying on historical information, which is no longer quite as valid. Trump is not a standard Republican, so they can't use the standard methods, but they are. So I think that in the end, we're going to see quite a lot more support for Trump than the polls are saying.
You have a section in this article at stream.org where you talk about scientific polls and how there really just aren't anymore. Can you explain that?
Yeah, there is no such thing as a scientific poll. You'll hear, this is not a scientific poll and this isn't. No. every poll is an accurate, presuming nobody's lying or something like this or a miscalculation, but every poll is an accurate sample of the people who look like the people who were polled. And that's as simple as that. Every poll, so if you're going to, say, Fox News, they'll have one poll. If you go to CNN, they'll have another. And there'll be a disparate, difference because of the types of people who watch those two different networks. Well, all of that is fine. It tells you something about the types of people that they're sampling. But every poll also is a prediction. We need to treat every poll as a prediction of what the final outcome will be. And in that case, polls are often loaded in favor of Democrats. That's just the way they do these samples and the way it historically has turned out. And there's, perhaps good reason for this. Everybody knows that the mainstream media sort of supports Democrats much more than they support Republicans. The media is often, if not the pollsters themselves, they commission these polls, and so the results might be slightly biased in their favor. So we need to not look at what is a scientific poll or non-scientific poll, because all polls are scientific. We need to look at good predictions. And in this case, a lot of people are going to be surprised. The predictions are failing sort of left and right. They failed in Europe in the past elections that we had there because people aren't seeing this rise of this sort of nationalism, right-wing nationalism, alt-right phenomena. The pollsters didn't catch it. In the Brexit vote, where the people of England voted either to remain in the European Union or to leave, again, we had a sort of a shy phenomena. All the celebrities in the world, all the politicians, all the major people said we must remain. And they painted the people who wanted to leave as these Neanderthals, these half-wits, these mouth breathers. Yet the polls had remained ahead by about 6 points right before the election. And when the election was held, it was the opposite, pretty much the opposite. And they, of course, voted to leave. So the polls, using all their standard methods and everything, failed dismally. They also failed in the British parliamentary elections. They did not foresee the immense rise of the conservative side, the gains that they would make. And that's happening in France as well. The polls also were wrong about Maria Le Pen and some of these conservative alt-right sort of candidates there. The standard methods just aren't working. And I think that this wave, at least in the West, is unappreciated by the pollsters and the statistical methods that they're using. And I think we're going to see the same phenomena happen here. At least I think we're seeing it right now.
I have a sneaking suspicion that there's going to be a lot of really upset liberals come election day. I hope so. I think that Mr. Trump is probably going to do very well. But I was going to say is it sounds a lot like the pollsters are kind of falling into a trap very similar to the climate computer modelers, where they're obsessed with their system so much that they really can't see the forest for the trees anymore.
That's a beautiful analogy. That's exactly right. That's a perfect analogy. The thing with the climate modelers is they love their theory. The theory is beautiful. It really is. It's a beautiful theory. It took many people with great brains, a lot of intelligence, endless man hours to create this theory, to create these computer models, and lives were given over to this thing. And of course they're in love with this theory. They should be. It's a wonderful thing. The only problem with it is it doesn't match reality. The predictions don't match reality. And it's the same thing with the pollsters. There's a lot of work that goes into these polls. I mean, we gloss over this here, but there's an immense amount of work that goes into these polls. And they have theories behind them that lead them to make their prediction. And they, too, are reluctant to change. They don't want to admit how much things are different than they used to be. And they, too, are in love with their theories. And I think they're going to have a very rude awakening. I mean, after all, I think we're going to see Barbara Streisand and I forgot who else move to Canada come November 30th.
I actually saw a sign online. I've been saving the picture. It was a ad for a real estate broker, and it says, "Moving to Canada, we can help."
That's perfect.
So you're a statistician. Your PhD is in basically math, right? Really? So do you think? I mean, I know the climate modelers are tied to the money, and they're probably not going to change. But pollsters make their living by having accurate polls. Do you think that if, say, for example, we have a Trump landslide, if they will stop and take a look at what they're doing and how it affects their business model?
Oh, they have to. There's probably, I don't know of any, but there has to be some polling organizations out there right now that are noticing this. They can't fail to see what is happening. They're reluctant, probably in this election, to do it before the votes are taken. I mean, there is the peer pressure thing even among pollsters. They don't want to give bad news. Look at what happened to Nate Silver. Nate Silver is a famous pollster who correctly called Barack Obama beating McCain. That was so welcome to the mainstream media, to the press, to the politicians, to the our cultural elites, that he soared in popularity, and he's making a fine living off of this. Unfortunately for poor Nate, he hasn't done too well since then. He really missed the interim elections that we had 2 years ago because he wasn't quite seeing what was going on, and he really badly blew the Republican primaries. Everybody was saying Trump hasn't a chance. There's no way Trump can win. It's ridiculous to believe Trump can win. I predicted back in January Trump would win the primaries easily. It was plain to see, as long as you were willing to change your mind about how you viewed things, and I think that's what all of these people need to do. And they will, like you say, they make their living on this. If they don't change, they're going to be in, as we used to say in the military, deep kimchi. They won't be able to continue their livelihoods, unlike climate modelers who rely on the government, and the government doesn't really care too much about reality. So there's a difference.
All right, we got about a minute left. Any closing remarks? How people reach you? You have a blog, right? Yep.
I do. You can go to stream.org. I have several articles on this there, or my own personal blog, wmbriggs.com. And pay attention to the polls that happen right after the debate. Make sure to look to see when the polls were taken after the debate. We're already seeing one or two come out, and Trump is pushed ahead. So he did better than most people are saying.
All right, Matt, thank you for your time. You have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
All righty, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Someone is killed by a car in New Hampshire every 3 days. Governor Maggie Hassan signed the hands-free bill that turned otherwise law-abiding New Hampshire citizens into criminals. By making it illegal to be seen touching their cell phones while driving, more motorists are taking their eyes off the road, resulting in a 20% increase in the number of people killed by motor vehicles, all thanks to Governor Hassan. But Hassan's body count doesn't stop there. Her refusal as governor to stand up and oppose amnesty and illegal immigration favored by her Democrat Party masters encouraged more trafficking of drugs across our southern border. Drugs killed 6 people in the Granite State every 5 days in 2015, a number projected to rise to 4 killed every 3 days in 2016. The way Maggie Hassan's body count keeps rising, you'd think she was a Clinton. Voting for Maggie Hassan is suicide, and not just because she supports Chicago-style gun control. Here's another great tale, more evidence of Democrats ruining everybody else's fun. Penn State to costume shame students with poster campaign. Taking a swing at cultural appropriation, Penn State's University Park Undergraduate Association, the UPUA, unanimously approved a "We're a Culture, Not a Costume" resolution. This is reported by Legal Insurrection. The resolution calls on the UPUA to discourage offensive Halloween costumes by displaying posters featuring individuals of different cultures holding up pictures of someone in a costume that they feel is offensive to their culture. One poster from the 2012 edition of the campaign, for instance, shows a despondent-looking Asian male standing in front of a translucent image of an Asian college student balancing a bowl of rice atop a large stack of textbooks, while another features an annoyed white male juxtaposed against a banjo-playing hillbilly. The We're a Culture, Not a Costume campaign was started in 2011 at Ohio University, and while the posters have gotten some praise, they have also been relentlessly mocked with parodies, particularly in response to the 2011 campaign, which employed the slogan, "This is not who I am, and this is not okay," along with individuals holding photos of cultural stereotypes. Well, let's see, what do I have to say about that? Ghosts and zombies are probably still allowed because Halloween could just as easily be about celebrating Democrat get-out-the-vote drives to register the dead as anything else. No word yet on when we'll hear about how dressing up like slutty nurse or slutty lawn care girl or slutty women's healthcare patient is an objectification of women. When the day does come, odds are good it will be because of a Sharia court sanctioned by Democrats bending backwards to allow Islamists to replace Western culture with their own. This means that moving forward, women will be costumed as burqa-wearing girl 365 days a year, and the pagan holiday once known as Halloween will no longer be celebrated under penalty of death by stoning. That wraps things up for this week, a little early like I promised, so thanks again to Skip Murphy and Matt Briggs, and we'll talk to you all next week.